In this video, I'm going to talk about Carl Jung and transpersonal dreams. So transpersonal dreams are contents that are transpersonal. So they relate to contents of the collective unconscious that are beyond what the dreamer has acquired throughout their life. So the dreamer hasn't acquired these contents through their consciousness, through living through their everyday life, but yet they have somehow in their dreams received contents that seem to be shared throughout all humanity. So Jung posits ideas like the collective unconscious, archetypes, and so these different contexts reveal a transpersonal domain or transpersonal part of the psyche which we all share in, similar to how we all share in a similar structure of the body. Jung is kind of trying to point out through these different dream images and making parallels to mythology and history. He's trying to show how there is a transpersonal domain of the psyche, namely something like what Jung would call the collective unconscious. So in this video, I want to give you an example of Jung dealing with one of his patients in a clinical setting where he reverts to dream interpretation. And so Jung in his time is trying to assess and deal with all the different available therapies at the time. So he's looking at Freud, he's looking at other psychoanalysts of his time, and he's looking at different therapeutic techniques of different forms of therapy. And so but one particular form is dream interpretation. And so we're going to look at an example of that today, and then in the end we're going to particularly look at what Jung posits as a transpersonal control point. I think that is very important, and we're going to explore what that means, a transpersonal control point, through illustrating this example between Jung and his client. But before I get into that, I wanted to just quickly mention that Jung sees dreams as a compensation. So he sees it as like the unconscious compensates for what the person in their conscious life does not have or lacks. Okay, so whatever the unconscious is showing in the form of a dream is kind of there as a form of compensation to help the dreamer assimilate something that they're missing or have overlooked, or which they don't have or they're lacking in their conscious outlook and view of life. Okay, so Jung saw dreams as this kind of this process, this mechanism that helped people compensate for what was missing in their conscious outlook of life. Okay, so that, keep that in mind as we're talking about this example, and as we're heading towards understanding what a transpersonal control point is. Okay, so let me now just talk a little bit about the example I'm going to give. So Jung had a particular woman who she was doing therapy with. Okay, and Jung outlines a few different psychoanalytic truisms or common occurrences that happen in psychoanalysis or in therapy in general. And so he was basically saying it got to the point where the woman that he was giving therapy to had to kind of end her therapy sessions with Jung because she had no more money really to continue on, and it was kind of time for her to move on, okay, from that therapeutic relationship. Now, the problems that she had were noted by Jung were that she had a father complex, something like that. And so what that means is, for all intents and purposes, just as a summary, is that she still had these emotional issues connected and rooted in her relationship with her father, okay? And so her father had passed away. She had a fairly good relationship with her father, but she still had these emotional issues that were tying her to her father. And so in this relationship, when it came to Jung ending the therapeutic alliance, the relationship that they have together with the therapist and the client, this too kind of mimicked a father complex where Jung was conscious of the fact that the woman was actually projecting her love and admiration for her father onto Jung. So saw Jung as a father figure, not just a father, Jung says, but a father and a lover. So a twofold influence over her emotions and the regularity of her stability of her emotions. So seeing Jung was giving a similar therapeutic effect of having a good relationship with the father and having a good relationship with a lover. Okay, and Jung basically outlines how that's too much for the therapist to handle. They are not that godlike that they can handle two roles like that, because no one is that good. There's too much good in that equation. Okay, there's not enough of the archetypal shadow or the negative side of the relationship there, because all humans fundamentally are flawed and have some type of negative aspect to them. So that's the outline of the problem and the issues that they're dealing with. Eventually the client came to confess and understand, yes, this is true. I do see you like a father and maybe even a lover. I'm not sure exactly if she said that, but she agreed that that was kind of the issue there. And she didn't want to let go of the therapeutic alliance or the relationship she had with Jung, even though she was conscious of the problem. Now, let's move on to the dreams. Now, Jung doesn't outline all of the dreams, but he outlines one key aspect of at least one of the dreams. And he says that throughout the dreams, he said that she imagined this doctor, which obviously was Jung, and the doctor though was exceedingly big. So he had a really big, he was really large, like physically large, and holding her like a little baby, rocking her, treating her tenderly, and the wind was blowing, over the wheat. And so Jung's interpretation of this, after thinking and wrestling through it and wondering, okay, well, she's obviously sees me as a father type thing, but she's conscious of it, so why hasn't her being conscious of that complex released her from the emotional attachment? You see? So that's the issue there. Why hasn't it worked, in other words? So Jung looks into it and he sees that there's a parallel between this image that this woman had in her dream of this kind of supernatural kind of being holding and rocking her and the wind blowing, and he sees through successive dreams that these dreams are kind of depicting a pagan god, something like Odin or Woden, okay, so a god of the wind, something like that. Now Jung sees that that in that fact that the dream is articulating and revealing this image of this medieval deity, that the woman is lacking a connection with God, so to speak. And so the woman in her conscious life really kind of rejects God in a sense. She doesn't really pay too much attention to it. She's obviously brought up in a Christian background, because that was the Christianity was very influential back in the day, in her time, but she herself didn't really adhere to a God, so in her conscious life she rejected the image of God, but Jung saw in her unconscious life she had this yearning for a relationship with a deity. Now he says to her this is what you're lacking. And you know, she took it on board, but she didn't really feel like it really aligned up with her. But even despite that, Jung still felt that this really was pointing towards her relationship with the transpersonal. So now I want to read this quote by Jung, because I think that this really does illustrate what this example is revealing to Jung, and how this might be interesting to us. Okay, so here's the quote by Jung. I saw how the transpersonal control point developed. I cannot call it anything else. A guiding function, and step by step gathered itself all the former personal overvaluations, how with this afflux of energy it gained influence over the resisting conscious mind without the patient's consciously noticing what was happening. From this I realized that the dreams were not just fantasies, but self-representations of unconscious developments, which allowed the psyche of the patient gradually to grow out of the pointless personal tie. This change took place, as I showed, through the unconscious development of a transpersonal control point, a virtual goal, as it were, that expressed itself symbolically in a form which can only be described as a vision of God. Okay, so through that we see that this concept of the transpersonal control point has been identified by Jung through the dream series, through analyzing these different dreams that this woman has had. Now, note, he says that this control point expressed itself symbolically in the form of what can only be described as a vision of God. So that vision of God then is actually pointing towards this mechanism of a transpersonal control point, namely a therapeutic effect that is inherent in dream images, in archetypal dreams, transpersonal dreams, dreams that come from the collective unconscious, that we all share in, that humanity shares in, that have this therapeutic effect, okay? And that seemingly operate and develop our personalities without our conscious mind even recognizing it. So Jung observed that she seemed to get better and develop along nicely, even without consciously recognizing that this is what was happening in her unconscious, in her dreams. But Jung saw the development of her personality through her dreams. So in other words, Jung is looking at an unconscious development of someone's personality and life, and seeing the conscious therapeutic benefits, even though they're not consciously aware of why they're receiving those benefits, or of the whole developmental process that's happening in the unconscious, namely the transpersonal control point. You see? So a control point is normally something like, you know, we know it in when we talk about health and safety, workplace and health and safety. You got critical control points of, you know, different temperatures that you can put food at. So, you know, it's basically like a risk management type thing. So Jung is basically postulating here this mechanism of the unconscious that has its kind of transpersonal control point, this mechanism which allows the human to connect with some transpersonal element, and then that releases a therapeutic effect in our life. And so he likens it symbolically to a vision of God, or a connection, a therapeutic relationship with God, as a you know, because you don't have it in your conscious awareness. You build this unconscious development and relationship with the deity. And Jung postulates that this couldn't be something she acquired throughout her life, because she didn't know anything of these kind of medieval deities. In her conscious life, she would have related God to something like Christianity. But the kind of deity we see in her dreams is a medieval one. You see, so that's where he shows that it's something from the transpersonal, because we see this again and again and again, and throughout different cultures that they have different dreams like this. And so I just thought that was interesting. So he's looking for a therapeutic mechanism, and the mechanism he sees within the dreams is this transpersonal control point. So this bridging and forming and developing a relationship with the transpersonal. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of highlight that, and I think that it's a very interesting thing for us to ponder. And you know, comment below if you've ever had anything that you would consider a transpersonal dream, or some type of mythological motif that you've noticed in a dream. And I think that it'll be very interesting for us to all continue to explore in our own lives. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like and share this video on different social media platforms, because that really does help me. And if you like this content, then stick around, because I'm going to be releasing more videos on Carl Jung, and I'll see you in the next one.